Okay, it looks like attendee numbers are stabilizing now, so we'll start. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for joining us for this afternoon's Q4 2023 European Road Freight Rate Benchmark webinar, brought to you by IU, Apply, and TI. We're very happy to be speaking with you once again about road freight rates in our first session of 2024. And very much this year, we'll be looking ahead to all the trends and developments we'd likely to see in the road freight market this year. A market, of course, still characterized by soft volumes and seemingly ever rising costs as well, with the latest introduction of the tolls we saw in December and January as well. So we'll be digging into all of those things and trying to give you the clearest possible view of price change and the recovery of the market. As things are still so volatile, it's such an important time to have this kind of visibility on all the data. So hopefully we can share that with you today. The webinar itself will last for 35 minutes or so as we go through the presentation. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So please do feel free to ask your questions using the Q&A tool during the session. We have a team available to answer questions as the session goes on by text. And then obviously at the end, we'll deal with as many as we possibly can, verbally as well in the session. We'll also be running a poll like we have in recent webinars after the third slide on the overall European benchmark to ask you what you think is likely to happen to rates in the next quarter. So please be prepared to respond to that as well. And as usual, we will be sharing the reports and the webinar recording immediately after the session today. So, if you miss anything, you'll have the opportunity to take a closer look and read the more detailed reports as well. So, I'm very pleased to be hosting you today. My name's Michael Clover. For those that don't know me, I'm Head of Commercial Development at Transport Intelligence. And for those that don't know Transport Intelligence, we're a provider of strategic intelligence and analysis of the road freight market and indeed the wider logistics industry. So if you need more information, insight, or forecasting for the logistics industry, then you can come to us and we'll be very happy to speak with you. I'm also joined by Nathaniel Donaldson, an economic analyst here at TI and our data team leader. Nathan is instrumental in the analysis of the data and in the analysis for this report. So Nathan, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
And in addition, we also have Marianne Savoni with us, who's Associate Director of Strategy and Market Intelligence at IU. Thanks, as always, Marianne, for joining us. And for those that don't know IU, could you just give a brief introduction of the organization?
Yeah, sure, Michael. So good afternoon to all. Briefly, IU is a World Transport Organization. So we are representing the road transport sector worldwide. Today, we count more than 180 members in more than 80 countries. And we can say that IU benefits from a large diversity of members. We have road transport national associations. We also have large logistic companies, service providers, and shippers. And what do we do exactly? What do we deliver as IU? We advocate at regional and global levels. We also manage and develop solutions to facilitate the trade, international trade and transport, globally speaking. And also we develop thought leadership on decarbonization, driver shortage, and digitalization matters.
Thank you, Marianne. And before I introduce our last panelist, I must just read out our disclaimer. So we remind you that all discussions and statements made by participants on commercially or strategically sensitive information may fall within the scope of competition law and be considered as unlawful. We invite you to refrain from sharing any information of such nature or entering into any such discussion, including during breaks. Thanks for that. Our last panelist is Thomas Leroux. He's Chief Executive Officer at Apply and is obviously the source of all the great data that we're going to be drilling into on rates today. So welcome, Thomas. And could you just introduce Apply for those who don't know Apply?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And good afternoon to all. I think we are more than, we have 1,600 people registered today. So it's a huge webinar. Still, figure are still going up. So it's very, very pleased to be here. Apply is a freight platform. We are offering different services to shippers and carriers, putting in relationships shippers that want to work directly with carriers for road transportations. And we have a vast variety of sources also for air freight and ocean freight. And one of the services that we are using today with our partners is the way we collect a lot of data, transactional data. We will talk about the way we are collecting this data. And this is the major source of data that we'll be using today.
Yes, thanks, Thomas. So that brings us nicely on to the methodology. If you could just take us through that and give a bit of background on the data we were looking at.
Yeah, for sure. So the platform that we have developed over the past years at Uplies allows us to collect and capture a lot of what we call transactional data, meaning real shipments that happen from point A to point B with all the characteristics you can imagine, the weight, the type of merchandise, different surcharges. And so we collect this data, air freight, ocean freight, and road transportation. And here we'll focus only on road transportation in Europe. The topic of the analysis of today will be really FTL, full truckload, general cargo. We will have a look at spot and contractual prices. Fuel is included in that. All the surcharge, we will talk about toll surcharge also. All these surcharges are included in that. And what is important is that you will see graphs with euro per kilometer. So this is easy to understand. We will have also full prices sometimes because it's easier to talk about that for certain analysis. And when we will see indexes, meaning we collect data from different countries or regions, for instance, this is a 100 base index. So we will try to remind for each graph what we are looking at, but you can see different data. It's important to note that at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks, Thomas. We'll try to highlight that as we go through, I think. And so the first chart actually is our European road freight benchmark for Q4 2023. And this is, in fact, an index, one of the indexes we do covering the whole of the European market. And obviously, you can note here that you're shown the contract and the spot index here. So the contract in the darker red, spot in lighter. Nathan, would you just take us through the overall trend we've seen in the last quarter across Europe?
Yeah, sure. So we're into a really interesting period right now, and actually it flows really well from the last webinar. We look at the numbers themselves. We see the spot index falling, while the contract rose. So we've got the spot index falling 4.5 points quarter on quarter, and then it's now down 14.8 points year on year. The contract, on the other hand, that rose 1.7 points quarter on quarter to 129.4, and it's now up 1 point. Year on year. So why this is really interesting compared to the previous webinar is that a lot of the trends and the forecasts that we identified then have come to fruition. And that's mainly the fact that the spot index had so much more space to fall, as we had the demand pressure continuing to fall off, freeing up capacity in the market and allowing further falls. But then on the other hand, we've got contract rates which are actually continuing to push up. So we have identified the fact that we've got such a bloated, inflated cost base versus previous years. And actually, we've now got new factors such as tolls and a lagged effect on costs that are continuing to push those that cost base up. And actually adding to, and especially on the contract prices, as Thomas mentioned, those surcharges that are already fit into those costs are passed on. So we've now got a spot rate index. The spot index is 5.5 points below the contract. And again, this is an index. So what this means is relative to its base level in quarter one, 2017, the spot index is now closer to its base level. So it doesn't necessarily guarantee that in monetary terms, we've got spot rates that are lower than contract. But actually, if we look at our sample data, we do see that now it's over 20%, over a quarter of sampled international lanes. We're seeing that spot rates in monetary terms have dropped below contract. And a good example, the main driver for this is Germany. So a big theme in this quarter's webinar is Germany's falling activity. And this has really affected its international trade throughout Europe. And we're now seeing that the immediate short-term demand is falling, but those costs remain high. So it's allowed those spot indexes and the spot prices to drop below on some major export lanes between Germany and major European cities, which is really available and applies detailed data. In terms of the market and the market pressures, since rates spiked in the first half of 2022, It was mainly plummeting consumption, and it was triggered by inflation that's pulled the spot rates down. We know that costs stayed high, so we didn't see that in the contract rates. But now we see that the main driver has switched to more production. So as we've settled in these lower levels of consumption across the continent, production is now adjusting to these lower levels of demand. We've got major countries such as Germany seeing its reduced competitiveness on the international markets. And this is reducing the activity, the industrial activity across Europe, reducing the demand for capital goods, intermediate goods, between major countries on the continent. We've got industrial output down quarter on quarter, 0.9% in the UK, 1.6% in Germany, and 0.2% in France, whereas consumption is actually looking quite stable, but at lower levels. We've also got the cost side, which Marianne will go into more detail. But basically, we've seen less pressure from diesel as that's trended downwards after we saw them shoot up, the fuel prices shoot up in previous years and early in the year. But the costs remain way up on previous years. So if we look on the European level and we look versus 3 years ago, we've got logistics, labour costs, which are up 28.2%, and we've got vehicle repair costs up 20.4%, tyres up 21.6%, and spares up 13.5%. So throughout that cost base, we've got elevated prices, which are keeping the rates up versus historic levels.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks, Nathan. That helps explain the situation. And just while you were speaking there, I just ran the poll on what people expect to happen to rates over the next quarter or so. So I'll end that poll and I'll just share the results with you. But I think it highlights really that everyone's in a sort of mixed bag really of slightly increasing, remaining flat, or slight decreasing, and it highlights that sort of balance between this elevated cost base that we're operating with at the moment that still seems to be increasing, but the soft demand in the market as well. And there's obviously a lot of volatility, but also uncertainty, and you can see that with those figures. Thomas, I don't know if you have a view on those poll results, if they match with what you're thinking on the road freight market at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, this poll is interesting as usual, because we are a bit more than 400 people that answer to that. So from a statistical perspective, it's interesting to have this view, and you're all from the industry. So I mean, we are quite aligned with what you're saying. Some rates will remain at flat, or will go back at a flat level, and we will see that in the following slides. And I guess some increase will happen if we are talking about the overall price, where we see the toll increase, where we see that nevertheless, the cost of owning a truck, the cost of drivers are increasing. So indeed, economy is more toward a slight increase or remain flat, and it's quite aligned with what we see over there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Thomas. And yeah, a quick line on the outlook then, as you see it, Nathan.
Yeah, I would say really accurate to what Thomas says is the way we view, and it really depends on the activity in the new year. A good example is that we saw total volumes and demand from TI's numbers side down -1% for 2023. We're now forecasting a slight increase of 0.6% based on our midterm numbers. So it has the potential to increase if we see the activity may rise, even though we enter on a downwards pressure. But if we see things pick up throughout the year, we do forecast back when we get to the end of the year that there could be a slight increase based on that increased demand side pressure of a 0.6% growth in 2024 in terms of volumes.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nathan. Very interesting. So I think we should move on to the cost side of things now, and the supply side issues really, and Marianne share her views on that. So starting off just on fuel price development, Marianne, what's the overall trend there?
Yeah, so briefly, as a reminder, before I start, we consider here the fuel prices at pump in Europe per liter. And you see that the graph shows an evolution of the fuel prices on a weekly basis since the first week of January 2022, and this is the last week of December 2023. So you have really the trend that we just mentioned right now. So what can we say here? And Nat's already mentioned that diesel prices have been continuously decreasing since the end of September, quite clearly, and notably thanks to the falling crude oil prices. And the to be more specific on the Brent crude oil price, the price averaged $78 per barrel in December, which is down from $94 per barrel in September, meaning a 17% decrease, reaching its lowest level since July 2023. So as a consequence, and as you can see here on the graph, you can find an average price at pump, which is now at 1.63 euro per liter in average in Europe, which means down 9% versus end of September, even if we are still 10% above the January 2022 level. We don't have to forget this comparison. So if we want to look forward, and when we consider what the US Energy Information Administration is saying, in Q1 2024, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries production cuts are expected to lead to global oil inventory withdrawals, pushing up Brent prices to an average of $85 per barrel in March 2024. So you could also wonder the impact of the geopolitical situation, of course. We are in the context of very high uncertainty, and indeed, notably the increasing tensions around the critical Red Sea shipping channel and all the other developments in the Middle East can have an impact for sure on the prices for next year, with potential disruption that could be maybe expected on the global oil trade flows, and that could potentially drive up the global oil prices further.
Thanks, Marianne. Yes, and there's so much going on supply side at the moment, all that just exacerbating the fuel prices, of course, but also looking at the toll increases as well, very important on lots of people's minds in the industry now. So, would you take us through that?
Yes, so I'm going to be brief on this one. You have a lot of information. You will have all the detail in the report that you can download after the webinar. Here is the timeline of the Eurovignette directive. And I'm just going to focus on the one that is important for us today, is the CO2-based tolling that you can see starting from 2024. And this is the EU directive 2022/362, amending the Eurovignette that was published last year, and which is entering into force this year. And so this directive is introducing the obligation for the member states to put in place a mandatory CO2-based tolling new framework for the rate variations. And this implementation is applicable from 24 March of 24. And it can coexist with the existing rate variation based on the Euro norm of the vehicle. And the increase in road tolls will have, and already have, and we will see more in detail during the webinar, the impact, negative cost implications for the transport operators, affecting their profits and also the rate strategies. Just to be more, and to finish on that, and to be more specific on this CO2-based tolling taxation, vehicles older than 4 years will face the biggest tolling increase. So the newest heavy-duty trucks with 2 or 3 axles, which are the most commonly used in the EU, will be assigned a CO2 tax reduction depending on engine fuel consumption compared to a set of reference values. In this case, electric and hydrogen-powered vehicles may benefit from a 100% exemption on the infrastructure charge until 2025. So as already mentioned, and we will see it on the rate already, the Germany new emission-based tolls into effect already in December last year, the 1st December 2023, and that already had an impact of an increase of cost around 80%. And we estimate also from our side in IRU that the tolling annual overcost could amount around 6,700 euros per truck. And just to finish on that, so now Austria and Hungary have implemented this new CO2-based tolling taxation since the 1st January. So we are more and more, we are finding more and more countries implementing this taxation, and we will find all the detailed information again in the report with all the different dates as we know today.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Marianne. So that yes, there's plenty on tolls in the report, but also we're going to come on to examples when we're looking at Germany and Austria a bit later on as well. But also some further forecasts looking a bit further ahead from RU now at driver shortage as well. Another key issue still in the market, even with available capacity as it is. But Marianne, could you just take us through some of the new data here?
Yeah, so I'm going to be brief on this one. A lot of you already know this number because we are showing this driver shortage data since some time. You can see in blue on the graph the driver shortage evaluation, which is a percentage of unfilled positions that are unfilled in Europe. And you can see that in 2023, we have a 7% of unfilled driver positions, which is representing around 200,000 truck driver jobs unfilled. And you can see that there is a decline of this driver shortage since or versus 2021. And what is important to mention here, and this is all what we heard just before about the volume trend, this decrease or decline of driver shortage is not due to an improvement of the attractiveness of the profession. It is mainly due to the decline of the European road freight transport volume in 2023 since 2021, reaching 1.90 trillion tons kilometer, which is the yellow line on the graph. And what we can say here is that the constrained purchasing power as nominal wages lagged behind inflation resulted in the low consumption and thus this lower demand for road transportation. And just to give you some perspective on 2024, what we could expect as a trend, the European Commission is saying that the GDP will improve to 1.3%, so meaning better or up 0.6% in versus 2023. And we can expect that increasing wages, the continued employment growth, and also maybe a better trend on inflation could lead to lift the purchasing power and boosting so the consumption. So we can expect this slight recovery for this year. And just to finish, when you see the 5 years, so going until 2028, you can see that we estimate a very big increase of driver shortage, which is also correlated with an increase of the volume. And this very, I would say, high increase of driver shortage is really linked with a high number of retirements that are going to happen in the workforce in the next 5 years, because a big part of the truck driver population is going to retire in 5 years. So driver shortage remains a key issue.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. It's really interesting to see the forecast over that longer run, actually, and see the demographic situation kind of biting at that point. You can really see the impact it's going to have. So still something for the longer term to worry about there. All right. Well, we'll come on to our sort of lane by lane slides now. And this one is one of our major high volume lanes here, looking at Madrid to Paris and the return leg from that as well. This one's given in absolute, so total value for the for movement on this lane. Thomas, you're going to take us through this one, if you don't mind.
Yes, so indeed, this is in total value, all included, meaning all the surcharges, including the diesel, the fuel is, so everything is included in that. What we can see over there is, I mean, first quite striking is that when we look at the head hole and the back hole, both have undergone a complete swap. So the first one that was in the top, the Spain to France, the Madrid to Paris in this case, that was in spot, is just going down quite steadily over the past quarter. While when we're looking at the reverse, the France to Spain, Paris to Madrid, both in contract and in spots, C for contract and S in spot, as you can see on the legend, we see that the one in gray and black, these two keep rising, let's say. And I mean, this is the result from our point of view of low consumer good demands in France, and especially if we compare that to a quite robust consumer demand in Madrid or in Spain globally. And this is the key market forces really that affects the rates, where we see that Spain over the past quarters, and we have talked about that in the past webinar, but Spain have suffered a very short but intense inflation, when in France it was not the case. Inflation was at a high level, but over a longer period, and right now we are still we have in France an inflation that is still, let's say, high, especially if we compare that to Spain. So if we look at the macroeconomic level, we think that this is clearly what drives the price of transportation, a consumer good demand or global demand really for transportation. You will see in the reports all the details regarding the increase of plus X% or Y%, and this is very detailed. If I just can try to give two insights, the first thing is that regarding the cost really of the cost of transportation between these two countries, we can see that Spanish carriers provide a good part, a majority of the supply for this specific lane. And if we're looking at the labor costs for drivers in Spain compared to the rest of Europe, this increased for sure, but at a lower level than France or Germany. It might also explain some of the variations that we can see over there. And then on the forecast part, what we can expect for this lane, so it's not that easy to say for sure, and we can see that on the graph with lane going above or behind the other. What we can see is that rates were quite close together in 2017, 2018. Then with the COVID, we had a big increase and a strong volatility of rates between spot contract on end haul or backhaul. And it seems to be back to the same funnel, let's say, where we can expect the rates from Madrid to Paris that are plumbing right now, the run in pink, let's say, go back and follow a same trend that will be an up pricing trend, but quite stable over the past for the quarter to come.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, very interesting as well to look at what's going on between France and Spain. Two of the economies doing generally better in Europe than some of the other large ones. And now we're going to turn, and the next few slides really we'll be looking at various lanes connected to Germany, really, and hopefully we'll try and draw out some of the effect of the toll price increases we've seen as well. So we'll start off looking at France, Germany, and Marianne's going to take us through this one.
Yeah, so thank you, Michael. On this lane, you can see that the rates on this lane have continued their downward trajectory, with the exception of the contract rates to Duisburg being pushed up by the new German tolls. As you can see, the contract rates rose above the spot rates on the head wall for the first time. And this is really due to the cost of the new German tolls that was priced directly into the contract prices. So spot rates to Lille are now 5% cheaper than the contract after being 7% more expensive last quarter. With 40% of the European automobile assembly and processing plants in France and Germany, we can say that the car manufacturing activity grows at significant volume and thus demand side pressure to the road freight on this lane. It's a key reason that the rates remain elevated on this lane through all 2023, and while the total consumption and industrial production have fallen. And as I mentioned earlier, the new German tolls added significant upward pressure to the contract rates on this during the quarter, and was a driving force behind the 10% increase on the contract rates to Lille. There is another important factor to mention here. Since 2019, we observe labor costs in the transportation and storage sector increasing, up 17% in Germany and 15% in France. And we can expect further labor costs increase due to an inflation catch-up effect for the European workers' wages. So, as already mentioned, I mentioned it also earlier, the fuel prices are the good news on the lane because of the falling prices we can observe between September and December between the two countries. And when looking forward, a slowdown in activity from the car markets may see total activity pull rates down in 2024, but for now the demand we can say remains strong.
Great, thank you, Marianne. Yes, and we'll move on now to another German lane. This time the lane from Germany to Poland. And Nathan's going to take us through this one.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. This is another one where we can see the effects of the toll. So we'll look at all the rates. All rates apart from the backhaul contract fell. So on the head haul to Duisburg, the contract rates fell 4.4% quarter on quarter. They're now down 14.2%. And the spot market fell 1.4% quarter on quarter. Now down 13.7%. On the backhaul, contract rates rose. So they rose for the first time in a year. And they were up 2.3% quarter on quarter, but they remain down 4.3% year on year. So if we look at the market, similar to what I mentioned previously for Germany, but the big thing is that it looks like consumption has bottomed out. So we're not seeing the falling consumer volumes pulling the rates down as it frees up capacity and reduces the demand side pressure in the market. But what we do see from the Statista data, so that's the German Office of National Statistics, is that the production is definitely falling. So production has fallen, and it will continue to fall. So if we just look at the peak period before we go into the industry, the volumes did grow. They did peak up 5.9% if we're looking at peak consumption volumes, but adjust that for seasonality, and we do see they're down 0.3% and 6.1% below 2020. So that's still on the consumption side. But yeah, so back to the production. So we do see it's definitely weakening. The Statista data puts production, capital goods production, 9.8% below its 2019 level. And then also, if we look to indicators for the coming quarters for 2024, and the new orders for capital goods fell 6% quarter on quarter. That's available quarter four data. So it looks like they're down, they're falling, and they will continue to fall as we head into 2024. And further ease pressure, so that's going to reduce demand for road freight for the capital goods and the intermediate goods that go into making those. If we look at and if we consider this lane, it's an interesting situation because the industries are so intertwined. And so actually that's why we don't see such a serious and sharp fall. We're seeing a steady fall, as actually they've got long-term contracts, but now and long-term relationships, but we see that the volumes are pulling this activity down. And in terms of costs are rising, and this really shows the effect of the lower demand. So we've got really high cost increase, especially for the Polish haulers that dominate this lane. Maintenance costs up 49.7% versus 2019 after really high inflation. Also, the effects of inflation have pushed transport sector wages up 56.8%. That's for the Polish economy. So the fact that we're seeing these falls in rates, and even at a time when the costs are being pushed up, shows that the demand is dropping off. So overall, we're looking likely to see further falls.
This is one of those lanes where we might have expected to see more of an increase, and it just tells us, the demand situation is really countering cost increases as well. And actually, if we move on then to looking at a lane between another international lane, but this time between two countries where both have had recent toll introductions, it's really interesting to see the trends here. And there's quite a lot going on with the different rates on this particular chart here. So I'm going to ask Marianne to try and shed some light on what exactly is going on and whether or not we can really see the effects we might have expected from the tolls here.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, as you say. So the rates between Germany and Austria have trended downwards, with the exception of, as you can see, of contract rates from Duisburg to Vienna, which rose after absorbing the effect of the new higher emission based tolls. So both consumers and producers are demanding a smaller volumes of goods in Austria, and which is translating into less demand side pressure on road freight rates. And more precisely, there is a drop of manufacturing volumes, taking them below 2022 levels, and Q4 output falls for capital also and intermediate goods. On the backhaul, German consumption remains low, down 11% versus 2020. And German consumers are still reducing spending, and especially in the higher cost of the fast-moving consumer goods, such as meats, which fell 1% in Q4 2023, and is now 18% versus minus 18% versus 2020. So we can say that whole year costs have remained elevated, which keeps rates well above historical levels, even while the demand remains down. And in Q4, rates were also inflated by the supply side disruption caused by the protesting farmers and German hauliers that happened the last quarter of last year. So also the Germany's new emission-based toll system led to the great growth on the head wall, as higher tolls were incorporated as well here into the contract prices. And this is resulting into a 10% quarter-on-quarter rise. And as I mentioned earlier, starting January 1st, 2024, Austria will also implement the new CO2 tolling taxation directive. And so this will also, of course, further increase the costs. It's important to know that this increase is not a temporary spike, and tolls have added to the already high cost base on this lane. It's important to mention it here. So looking forward, Germany's tax stagnation is expected to have significant consequences for trade volumes with its neighbors, and notably knowing that for Austria, Germany is the first commercial trade partner. And so the falling demand side pressure had the ability to further pull down all rates. However, an already high cost base, as I said, has been further inflated by a toll system overhaul, which will without a doubt push up contract rates in the coming months.
Yes, thanks, Marianne. We will be revisiting this as well in the future, I'm sure, to see how that elevated cost base affects the absolute rates as well. And in these cases, these have all been absolute price or total price charts. So we should be able to see that coming through. So our last chart on this theme is on the German domestic rates, which actually is given in monthly terms this time, I think up to end of December, in this instance, to try and draw this out as well. Thomas, can you just take us through the index here?
Yeah, I will be very quick on this one because we have talked a lot about Germany, but this is a quite important topic right now because of the toll increase, because of many topics, including also the low demand from Germany. Here, what we can see directly is an increase of plus 8.3% between the months of November and December of 2023. So it changes here, the view. As you can see, we have a monthly index on this part where we were previously in a quarterly basis. And we wanted to do a small focus on that, really on the month-to-month basis. Remember that at Apply, we have data on a weekly basis, but granularity of monthly or quarterly are quite interesting to see, to have a look at global trends. I will stop on that, on the fact that there is an increase. For now, this is only 1 month. Don't forget that also we have 1 month of data in December, with the data that we have collected in January are in the same trend, where we can see clearly an increase due to these tools that are passed to customers, to shippers. Let's see how it will come up on the first quarter of 2024. What will be the impact in Germany, but also with the trade with other countries in Europe, and with the implementation of the same emission-based tool system from other countries, as we just mentioned.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. So the early signs are that you can see a bit of an uptick in the data coming through, and that those extra costs are generally being passed on. All right, so last slide on rates, and we thought we'd have a revisit of the UK international lanes, especially as in the last week or so we've seen another wave of post-Brexit changes to customs procedures and the possible impact they might have on rates. So I think we'll have to be very quick with this one, Nathan, because we're really over time. But if you wouldn't mind just highlighting the key trend here.
Yeah, sure. So to keep it brief, I mean, it's quite a complicated situation for the UK, because we can't only just make our decisions based on the activity that we're seeing. Even though it's a similar story that we're seeing in other countries, we've got consumption which is settled at a lower level, and is not pulling down the demand pressure too much. We do have production that is falling, and we've got production that is definitely falling based on the latest data. But then the big story is the fact that we've got a new situation from Brexit. So the 5 times delayed checks on animal and plant foods is coming into that came in previous week. So that's actually increased the administration and delays of plant and animal goods crossing the border between the UK and the European Union. And then we will have in April, so we won't see the effect in Q1, but in Q2, we've got the addition of the physical checks that again have been many times delayed. So even though we're seeing falling activity and we're seeing less demand side pressure, the fact that we've got those non-economic drivers that are going to increase the delays, increase the complexity of doing trade on this lane, means we've got the possibility of further increases. And as we see the rates have dropped down after falling consumption, but they do remain elevated, and the potential for them to be pushed up more in the first half of 2024.
Yeah. So again, we'll be watching that space and see how the data plays out as those changes come in and are visible in the data as well. Right. Well, that brings us to the end of our content slide. So thanks very much for coming to listen to us today and talking about road freight rates. We focused a lot about tolls there and the big changes in the market, but we're now able to answer your questions. I can see that our team have been working hard to answer some of those questions while we've been talking, but we'll answer a few now as well. This way too. I've seen a few questions already popping up about forecast and outlook, and we've spoken a little bit about that already, but I think it might be good to give our view on that as well. So this first question here is, what's the forecast for spot and contract rates in 2024? I'm not sure we can give a definitive forecast on that, but perhaps I can ask you to share some of your views on rate development for this year. Maybe perhaps we could start with Thomas on that.
Yeah, I will try. I will try to forecast what will happen for 2024. The issue, I mean, for sure, this is not an easy task. What will be the clear drivers are first the demand. Will the demand catch up or not? When we look at the forecast at the European level or the global level, at the worldwide level, 2024 won't be a big year for the growth, the total GDP growth. So it means that the demand will maybe catch up by the end of the year at the third or fourth quarter. So it can put a bit more pressure on the demand for transportation and might tend to increase the rates. But what will also drive the prices will be the cost increases, the toll increases, and so I think we will see increase of rates because of the cost increase that are underlying, but this increase of rates will be quite limited because the demand won't be here. And it's quite good, let's say, for consumer that today we have increase of tolls and others in an economic environment where we have a low demand. Because if you had a high cost with a very high demand, then rates are going crazy. So this is my forecast. Let's say stable or quite slightly increasing rates for 2024.
Yes, thanks, Thomas. I see you also mentioned that you wanted to answer another similar question, just talking about timing. So, and when to go for an RFQ. I suppose your answer to that is that it sounds like, well, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, no, this is tricky, and we had a lot of this answer. Is it the good time to go with an RFQ or not? This is the same question. I mean, it's very difficult to answer. We had the same question for ocean freight also, and it's difficult to answer. In this question, the question was, is it good to go for a RFQ or to go for spots? I will answer to the spot part, meaning I think in the forthcoming years, we might have an increase of volatility due to economical shocks or to geopolitical shocks, and having a balanced approach with RFQ, with contracts, and with spots, I think it's a good way to go. And if something is going on, maybe you can put a bit more emphasis on the spots, and so being prepared to have tools, digital tools to be able to go either for spot or contract, I think it's a good thing to mitigate the risk.
Yes, thanks, Thomas. And Nathan, I don't know if you'd like to share your view, maybe with some of TI's forecasts for volume development and obviously then rate development as well for the year ahead.
Yes, definitely. So I think in our latest numbers, really what we saw a clear drop We saw a clear drop in demand and big falls in pressure in 2023. Now, as we look into 2024, we're not seeing those big drop-offs. We don't really expect them. We don't have that constant attack of inflation on spending. Interest rates remain high, and we are seeing that this is going to, the combination of high interest rates is going to discourage industrial expansion, and then we've got lower consumption, is going to keep it low. So we don't see much pressure, but we do see a better situation than what we've had. So we do see, as I say, we've not got that erosion on spending from inflation, and this can allow some type of growth. We'll find out further throughout the year, but initially we forecasted a less than 1%, so a 0.6% growth in volumes in 2024 for European road freight. And should inflation continue to stay low, if industries are able to adjust to the new levels of consumption and consumers can gain some of their spending power back from rising wages, then we'll see a slight increase, but we don't expect to see further big drops, and we don't expect to see any big growth that will push rates up from demand side pressure.
Okay, yes, thank you, Nathan. Now, we've got quite a few questions about different lanes where we're seeing increased rates, and looking at maybe with that being a result of tolls in Germany. But questions about how that may not be the case on the return leg. And I think Marianne actually and Nathan and well, everyone really addressed this to some extent in their answers earlier, but basically we look at that and say there's lots of complexity on those lanes, lots of demand side factors driving price development as well, and on some instances they will be over and above. So if you're thinking, well, you know, why are tolls rising from Germany to Vienna, Duisburg to Vienna, but not from Vienna to Germany, then it's, of course, tolls apply, but there are also lots of other factors that influence demand on each of those lanes, and therefore would influence prices as well. So we try and show where the rate data does cause increases, but in some cases there are other factors that may go against that as well. I have some questions here which look like they might be of interest for you, Marianne, looking at policy and so on in here. So just a few questions looking at driver shortages as well, which I'll try and sort of bring together. But there's one specifically here on forecasts, saying what actions are forecasted to be done on EU level to decrease driver shortages. So I know you track this very closely at IU. So would you just like to talk a little bit about some of the latest actions on driver shortages, how they're changing?
Yes, so the main action are and with the European Commission, this is something that we are working on together, is to investigate and to see how we could employ third country drivers across the EU. This is one of the key levers that we see as having potentially an immediate or short-term impact to mitigate exactly the number that you saw before, which is the 700,000 potential truck drivers jobs missing in 5 years. So we are working with the European Commission to facilitate notably the driving license recognition, and to facilitate in a way the exchange and the recognition of the driving license from these third country I would say drivers. And this is something that we are, I think we can come during this year or very early beginning next year with solutions that could be implemented and directly used by the different transport operators, so they can hire easier drivers coming from third country drivers, in fact. So this is one thing. The second one, which is more complicated, is how to better or improve the image of the profession. And this is something that needs to be done on national level. And I have to say that a lot of companies are doing a lot today to improve the image by making social media campaigns, changing the way to recruit, trying to give more flexibility to the hours of driving. So we have a lot of solutions today happening on the ground, and also the associations are trying as much as possible to to make some direct links with the governments to facilitate notably the access to the profession with less costly driving license, because this is one of the big barrier, the high cost to obtain a driving license. So a lot of things are happening, but I have to say that the first I mentioned, so notably to attract third country drivers, is one of the key levers that could impact quite largely the profession in the coming years.
Yes, thank you, Marianne. And there's also quite a lot of questions just generally about coverage of different countries around Europe. I've seen on Italy, on the Netherlands as well. So see, this is just a snapshot of the data that's available from Apply on rates. But Thomas, would you just like to explain a bit about the geographic coverage for those people asking that kind of question?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen all the questions, and indeed, we had less than 1 hour, so we needed to select some origin and destination. You have seen at the beginning of the presentation the coverage that we have in Europe, almost in all countries, but then the coverage is better in some countries than others. I mean, here we are talking about, and this is to answer another question also, this is FTL trucks. We do have data also for LTL. This is general cargo. We have data for reefer, bulk, or other type of merchandise. So if you need more details, please feel free to reach us, and we can talk about it.
Great, thank you. Yes, and there's another question here, which Nathan, perhaps you can have a go at answering, which is from Cyril, which is with economy slowing down, there's overcapacity, which drives prices down, especially for spot rates. At the same time, carriers are faced with increased cost. What does this mean for carriers? Are they driving below cost level now? And will there be a flash out problem, I presume, at some point?
Yeah, so in response to that, I would say the margins is definitely something that we're aware of. So as we see the spot rates continue to fall due to increased capacity, freed up capacity and the lower levels of demand, and them being so much lower than the contract rates, it would suggest that further falls are squeezing margins. And we have said this for quite a few quarters, is that especially with the increased level, the elevated cost base, which we know is much higher than previous years, we should be cautious of how much further we expect them to fall. And that there has to be a limit, and we must approach it. We must be approaching them, especially when we're seeing those spot rates drop below the contract. It would suggest that it is definitely squeezing margins. It's not going to be the the choice rate to be working at it. It was pulled down by the demand. So I would say something we just need to be aware of, that there is a limit to how far these can fall. With a higher cost base, we can assume that in places where the demand is really low, it is already the margin is already quite low. So I'm not going to speculate in terms of how the companies will respond and what's going to happen with the market, but it is something that we're aware of, that any further cost increases are going to further tighten that already low margin, and that if we do shift and we do see a shift towards the spot market, it can't go much lower. So if people are expecting much lower spot rates, there has to be a limit coming.
Thank you. And then I think we'll have to wrap up soon, but there's a few questions as well on costs. So someone asking if there's a key timeline or more information available in the report about major cost changes coming in. So yes, the report does talk about quite a few different cost changes. I have actually provided a timeline for some of the toll changes that we're seeing. And I think in the last quarter report, we also examined some of the timeline for some of the upcoming toll changes as well. And that leads on to another question about cost factors and whether we have breakdowns. Again, we have given breakdowns in previous quarterly reports here as well, and that's something that we can provide. So if you get in touch with us about that, we can certainly provide a bit more information about how those costs break down. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending again today. We are considerably over time, so thanks for sticking with us and giving us an opportunity to answer as many of your questions as possible. Of course, we're very happy to carry on the conversation with you. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask of any of the panelists today, please do get in touch with respective organisations. IU, I'm sure, will be very happy to talk to you about regulatory issues, driver shortages, tolls, and so on. Apply, of course, about freight rates. And if you'd like to discuss any other issues on the logistics industry and more strategic questions, then TI will be very happy to discuss those with you. So please do feel free to get in touch with us. But thanks very much for joining us today. I thank very much my panelists, Nathan, Marianne, and Thomas, for joining too, and the team answering questions behind the scenes here. And we hope to see you again for next quarter's paper. So thank you and goodbye.